Every evening I clock into my shift at the McDrive on the edge of town, flipping on the lights and prepping my station. It's not exactly a dream job, but it pays the bills, and I like the quiet. The place is pretty isolated, surrounded by nothing but dark fields, and the occasional flickering street lamp. It gives me plenty of time to think, or just zone out. You see, the McDrive isn't your typical bustling McDonald's with kids screaming for ice cream or couples bickering over who gets the last fry. No, it's more like the last outpost on the way to nowhere. The kind of place where the only thing stirring after midnight are the thoughts in your head and the occasional stray cat looking for a dropped nugget. I often find myself wondering about the lives of the people who come through my drive-thru. There's the man who orders a Big Mac without the middle bun. What life choices led him to this dietary peculiarity? Or the woman who always asks for extra pickles, then picks them off one by one, eating them before she even leaves the window. It's a peculiar place for people watching, and believe me, there's no shortage of characters. I suppose you could say the job has its perks. For starters, the solitude. It's just me and the hum of the fryer most nights. And then there's the simplicity of it all. No corporate ladder to climb, no office politics to navigate. Just me, the burgers, and the occasional "would you like fries with that?" But don't get me wrong, it's not all grease and tranquility. There's also the bizarre, like the guy who once tried to trade a live chicken for a filet-o-fish, or the lady who insisted on serenading me with what she claimed was an ancient Viking ballad before collecting her order of chicken nuggets. I guess when you work the night shift, you become a magnet for the eccentric and the sleep-deprived. It's a job that teaches you the fine art of patience and how to maintain a poker face when confronted with the absurd. Like that time a teenager asked me if we served dinosaur meat because he was on a paleo diet and trying to keep it authentic. I just smiled and offered him a salad, far less prehistoric, but it seemed to satisfy. Then there's the graveyard shift camaraderie, between me, the mop, and the raccoon that tries to sneak in if I leave the back door ajar. I've named him Bandit. He's not much for conversation, but he's good at reminding me to lock up. Of course, not all nights are filled with whimsical encounters. Sometimes the darkness seems a bit too close, the silences a bit too deep. On those nights, the wind whispers through the drive-thru window like a harbinger of less mundane things. And I can't help but feel a chill that isn't from the freezer. But I shake it off, turn up the radio, and get back to my duties. After all, someone has to be here, serving up smiles and fries. And who knows, maybe tonight's the night I'll finally see something that really makes me believe in the ghost stories. Or at least, gives me a good laugh. So as I start another shift, I settle in, ready for whatever or whoever comes my way. Bring on the night, with all its fried secrets and drive-thru mysteries. Most nights are uneventful at the McDrive. You get your usual late-night crowd, the tipsy partygoers craving greasy food, and the sleepy truck drivers looking for a quick coffee. But that particular night started just like any other, with me serving coffee and burgers to the sleepy and the sober. The procession of customers was as predictable as ever. First came the caffeine zombies, office workers still in their suits and ties, looking like they'd been ambushed by a Monday, and it was only Thursday. They'd pull up with eyes barely open, muttering their orders as if reciting a spell to summon the will to stay awake. Large coffee, black, no, make it two. Their desperation was palpable, but so was their gratitude when I handed them their liquid lifeline. Then there were the rebels of reasonable bedtime, teenagers with their music thumping so loud I could feel the beat in my chest. They always seemed surprised when I knew their order before they shouted it over the bass line. "Let me guess, 4 large fries and the biggest soda we have?" I'd ask, earning a round of surprised laughter and nods. They were harmless, finding some thrill in navigating the night as if they were on a great adventure, possibly seeking the mystical land of no curfew. Close to midnight, the scene would shift to the more colorful characters, like Clockwork Carl, as I'd nicknamed him, a regular who showed up at exactly 11:47 p.m. every night. He'd order a vanilla shake and a side of fries. If he ever showed up a minute early or late, I'd suspect a tear in the fabric of time itself. His punctuality was as reliable as a Swiss watch, and I appreciated that in a world where even our ice cream machine's functioning was a gamble. And let's not forget about the philosophical drifter, another regular who didn't order much but liked to share his latest life theory as he waited. Last week's gem was, if life is a highway, I chose the bicycle lane. I never fully understood what he meant, but it seemed deeply significant to him as he pedaled away into the night. But of all the characters, none was more puzzling than Mrs. Edith. She drove a beat-up old sedan that wheezed into the drive-thru like it was on its last gasp. Mrs. Edith was as mysterious as she was punctual, always ordering a single cheeseburger with no cheese, which, I tried to tell her, was just a hamburger. But she insisted on her custom order with the solemnity of a diplomat negotiating peace terms. These regular encounters provided a tapestry of human interaction, weaving a thread of normalcy through the night. Each customer brought their quirks to the window, leaving with more than just fast food. They left with a piece of my nightly entertainment. Yet despite the familiar rhythm of orders and exchanges, there was always a lingering anticipation for the unknown. It hung in the air like the smell of fries, ever present and subtly enticing. It was this unpredictable element that kept the job interesting, a reminder that anything could happen, especially when the next customer in line was a new face. That's why, when the old dented station wagon pulled up with its cargo of quiet strangers, I was intrigued but unfazed. Little did I know, their order would serve up more than just food. It would deliver a mystery that would linger long after they disappeared. It was around 1 a.m. when they pulled up, a family in an old dented station wagon. I remember thinking the car looked like it had seen better days, probably a decade ago. A mom, dad, and 2 kids in the back, all of them wearing these pale, tired expressions. They ordered a bunch of Happy Meals and coffees. It was an odd sight, really. Who feeds their kids Happy Meals at 1 a.m.? But then again, who was I to judge? Maybe they were returning from a particularly depressing costume party, all dressed as insomniacs. As I reached out to hand them their drinks, the speaker crackled to life, a static-filled voice asking, "Do you serve anything that could exorcise sleep?" It took me a second to realize it was just the dad making a poor attempt at humor. I chuckled, handing over the coffees. "These should do the trick," I said, playing along. The family seemed normal enough at first glance. The kids were quiet, unusually quiet. They didn't fight over toys or complain about wanting different ones, the usual soundtrack to any Happy Meal transaction. Instead, they stared straight ahead, their eyes glazed over like donut frosting. The mother gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a smile that seemed to say, "I'm sorry about the existential dread, but could you add an extra ketchup?" While I was busy with the drinks, the intercom went on the fritz again. This time it wasn't just static. It sounded like whispers, faint and quick, as if someone was reciting a fast food incantation. Maybe McDonald's had introduced a new haunted menu item I wasn't aware of. I gave the machine a good smack, classic technical support. The whispering stopped, but not before leaving a cold shiver down my spine. Turning back to the window to hand over their food, I froze. The car was gone. No trace of headlights, no sound of an engine. Nothing. They had just vanished into thin air. I leaned out the window, peering into the darkness. The night was quiet, too quiet, as if even the crickets were too scared to chirp. For a moment I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole encounter. It wouldn't have been the first time my mind had played tricks on me during a night shift. Once, I'd convinced myself that a statue of Ronald McDonald was a serial killer in disguise. It turned out to be a very long night. I shook my head trying to clear the cobwebs. Maybe they'd simply driven off while I was battling the possessed intercom. But how could they have moved so silently, so quickly? And why leave without their food? Maybe they remembered the kids had school projects on healthy eating and fled in a fit of guilt. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Every car that came through made me jump, half expecting the phantom family to come back for their forgotten feast. But as dawn broke, reality settled in along with the realization. that some things just can't be explained. Like why we still use floppy disks on some of our machines, or why people order a salad at McDonald's. That night stuck with me, a ghost story in the making. And as I flipped the sign to closed and began cleaning up, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night had served up more mysteries than meals. I wondered if the family would ever return, or if they had disappeared forever, lost in the realm of unclaimed happy meals and spectral whispers. I tried to shake it off, even joked to myself about being part of a ghost story. Then came this morning. As I sipped my coffee, the local news played in the background, and that's when I heard it. A family killed in a car crash not far from here. The broadcast showed their picture, the same family, same tired eyes. The report said it happened yesterday evening, before they could have made it to my window. It's funny how your mind tries to make sense of the nonsensical. One minute you're serving happy meals to a family in a beat-up station wagon. The next you're grappling with the idea that you might have just had a supernatural drive-thru experience. Who needs horror movies when you have a night shift at McDrive? At first, I thought maybe I was the victim of an elaborate prank. Maybe one of my coworkers was messing with me, I thought. But the news report was as real as the half-eaten apple pie sitting in my fridge. And as far as I knew, none of my colleagues were skilled enough to hack the broadcast system. As the reality of the situation sunk in, I couldn't help but replay the night over in my mind. The quiet family ordering their late-night snack, their vanishing act that would make a Vegas magician envious, and the eerie silence that followed. It was like something out of a low-budget thriller, except the goosebumps were very real. I spent the rest of the day in a sort of fog. The normal chatter of customers and the sizzle of the fryer seemed distant, muted by the echoes of last night's mystery. I kept glancing at the clock, half expecting time to rewind and reveal it was all just a tired hallucination. That evening, as I prepared for my shift, the weight of the unknown hung over me like the greasy aroma of fast food. I entered the McDrive with a sense of trepidation, half expecting the ghost family to be waiting there with a complaint about their missing order. "Excuse me, but we ordered life, not death," they would say, with a wry smile that only the dead could muster. The first few hours were uneventful, almost disappointingly so. A few regulars came and went, their orders and faces blurring together into a montage of mundane. Every time the intercom crackled, I braced myself. But it was just hungry customers, alive and well, presumably. Then, as the graveyard shift crept along, the news story replayed in my mind. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Were the customers just figments of my overworked imagination? The questions multiplied like the burger patties I flipped. But there was no denying the chill that ran down my spine when I thought about the family's eyes. Those tired, soulless pools that seem to look right through you. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. But what if there's no soul to be seen? By the time my shift ended, I was more caffeine than man. My nerves jittery from too much coffee and not enough answers. The night had left me with more questions than a philosophy exam, and I was no closer to solving the riddle of the phantom family. As I locked up for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. The story felt unfinished, like a burger missing its top bun. And little did I know my spectral visitors had one more surprise in store for me, proving that some things don't stay buried, not even under a pile of fast food wrappers. I couldn't believe it. Was I losing my mind? I had to be. Ghosts aren't real, right? That's what I kept telling myself until I went back to work tonight. The shift started like any other, but then, as the clock struck the same hour as last night, the intercom buzzed. "Hello? We're still waiting for our food," a voice said, crackling through the speaker. It was them, the same family, asking for their order, the one I never handed out. You know, they don't train you for this at McDrive orientation. There's no handbook on how to deal with ghostly customers who didn't have the decency to stay dead. I briefly considered suggesting they try the haunted house down the street for their next meal, but something told me they weren't in the mood for jokes. The voice crackled again. "We really are quite hungry." I stood there, frozen by the fryer, the smell of oil thick in the air. This was absurd. Absurd and terrifying, but mostly absurd. I pinched myself. Yep, still awake. So, with a sigh that could stir the dead, and apparently did, I grabbed a tray and started filling their order. If ghosts wanted fast food, who was I to deny them? Maybe it would appease them, send them back to wherever they came from. As I packed up their happy meals, extra fries, no questions asked, I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here I was, serving burgers and fries to a family of apparitions who probably didn't even have stomachs anymore. What were they going to do? Digest it spiritually? I approached the window tentatively, half expecting to see their ghost car pull up, but there was nothing. Just the empty night and the distant sound of a dog barking, maybe at the moon, or perhaps at something unseen. I placed the tray near the window and backed away, my part in this eerie exchange complete. "Your order is ready," I called out into the void, feeling like a fool. To my surprise and horror, the tray began to slowly slide towards the window, as if being pulled by unseen hands. Then, just as silently, it vanished into the night. I blinked. Once. Twice. This was either a very elaborate prank or I had officially entered the Twilight Zone. Shaking my head, I turned to clean up, my heart still racing. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerators. "Thank you," it said. And then, nothing more. The air grew colder for a moment and I swore I felt a faint touch, like a breeze passing through. As I locked up for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, watching, waiting. Maybe they were grateful, or maybe they were just marking their calendar for their next visit. Either way, it was clear I might need to stock up on more happy meals. So there you have it. If you ever find yourself working the late shift at McDrive, just remember, some customers are more persistent than others. And if you're ever in doubt, just serve the ghosts first. It turns out they're not as patient as you might expect. And to all you out there listening to this tale, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the McDrive Ghost Whisperer, because something tells me my nights are only going to get stranger from here.